I was waiting for my lunch order at the counter of a small Italian place on Newbury Street when I saw my husband through the window. He was supposed to be in Dallas. His conference didn't end until Friday. He texted me that morning from what I assumed was his hotel room. "Miss you already. Safe flight back Sunday." I'd send back a heart emoji and gone on with my day. But there he was, half a block down the street, holding the door open for a woman. She had white hair cut close to her head, good posture, the kind of coat that costs more than my monthly car payment. She walked past him, and he put his hand on the small of her back, the way you only do with someone you know very well. My number was called. I picked up my sandwich. I stood at the counter and watched them through the glass until they turned the corner and disappeared. I didn't follow them. I sat at a table by the window and ate half my lunch without tasting any of it. The other half I threw away. My name is Waverley. I'm 32. My husband, Declan, and I have been married for 4 years. We met in law school at BU, both of us grinding through the same brutal first year, and somewhere between evidence class and finals week, we became inseparable. He's a corporate attorney now at a mid-sized firm downtown. I left law after 2 years to open a small bakery in the South End. We own a condo in Beacon Hill. We have a rescue dog named Fig. Our life looks good from the outside, and most of the time it felt good from the inside too. Most of the time. He'd been travelling more than usual this year. New client, he said. High maintenance. Required a lot of face time. I'd believed him because I had no reason not to. Because I trusted him. Because I was busy with the bakery and we were in that comfortable middle stretch of marriage where you stop questioning everything and just let life move. I drove home after lunch and sat in the parking garage under our building for 20 minutes before going upstairs. Fig met me at the door. I fed him, changed clothes, and went back to the bakery for the afternoon prep. I didn't call Declan. I didn't text him. I just worked. That night, he called at 9. Went to dinner with the client group, running late, boring work stuff. How was your day? I told him it was fine. I asked him what the weather was like in Dallas. Warm, he said. Sunny all week, actually. It was 45 degrees and overcast in Boston. I looked it up while he was still talking. I didn't say anything. I said I was tired and going to sleep. He said he loved me. I said it back. I lay in our bed in the dark with Fig curled against my legs, and I stared at the ceiling for a long time. The woman with the white hair. The coat, his hand on her back. I've known Declan for 8 years. I know what his face looks like when he's being polite, and what it looks like when he actually cares about someone. Through the window, even for just a few seconds, I'd seen the second one. I spent the next week paying attention to things I'd been ignoring, the new gym bag he'd replaced without mentioning it, the way he angled his phone away when I walked past, the evenings where he was more attentive than usual, bringing me coffee without being asked, asking too many detailed questions about my day. That last one took me a while to name. He was managing me, keeping me looking at the good stuff so I wouldn't look at anything else. On a Thursday night, after he fell asleep, I went through our joint credit card statements on my phone. Nothing obviously wrong. But I have my own separate account for the bakery, and he has one for his personal expenses. I didn't have access to those, and I'd never tried to look before. I started going back through the Venmo receipts he'd sent to our shared account for reimbursement. Hotel stays that checked out. Flight changes that made sense. And then, 2 months ago, a charge of $6,200 to a jewelry store in Back Bay. The reimbursement request said client gift. I sat with that for a long time. The next morning, I called my friend Priya, who is an accountant and also the most methodical person I know. I didn't tell her everything. I just asked her if there was a way to see what someone had been doing with a credit card you weren't on. She walked me through the legal options, which were essentially nothing without his consent, and the less legal options, which I decided not to pursue. What she said that actually helped was this: look at what you can see and see if it tells a story. I started keeping notes. Dates he said he was in Dallas versus flight records I could find through our shared airline miles account. Twice the mileage didn't match. Twice he'd flown somewhere else first. I hired someone. This felt like a line I'd never expected to cross, and I crossed it in about 48 hours. A woman named Sandra, who operated out of a small office in Cambridge and had done corporate investigations before pivoting to domestic cases. She was direct and practical and didn't make me feel ashamed for being there. I gave her Declan's photo, his car, his plate number, and the name of his firm. Focus on his time here in Boston, I said. I want to know who he sees when he says he's working late. She called me 6 days later. The woman's name was Harriet Wren, 71 years old, founder of a private investment firm that managed assets for old Boston money, widow 3 years ago. Her husband had been one of Declan's firm's founding partners, now retired to Florida. Through that connection, Harriet had become a client, an important one. The kind that didn't go through billing and wasn't listed on the public case roster. Declan had been meeting her privately outside the office for at least 8 months. Sandra sent me photos, a restaurant in Cambridge, a gallery opening in the South End, Declan's car parked outside her brownstone in Chestnut Hill at 11 at night, still there at 2 in the morning. I looked at the photos for a long time, then I made dinner because Declan was coming home that night and I needed something to do with my hands. He came in around 7, kissed me on the cheek, asked if I wanted wine. I said yes. He poured 2 glasses and sat at the counter while I finished the pasta. He told me about his day. I listened. He was wearing a watch I didn't recognize, dark face, leather band, the kind of thing you don't buy for yourself. Over dinner, I asked him very casually how Harriet Wren's portfolio review had gone. He went absolutely still. He set his fork down. He looked at me. I held his gaze and didn't say anything else. He tried 3 different starting points before he got a full sentence out. He said her name like it was a question, then said it wasn't what I thought, then said it was complicated, and I sat there eating my pasta and waiting for him to find the version of the truth he was willing to tell me. I know who she is, I finally said. I know you've been seeing her privately for months. I know about the restaurant in Cambridge and the gallery opening and the nights at her house. I know you weren't in Dallas last week, so you can either tell me what's actually going on, or we can have a completely different kind of conversation. He put his hands flat on the table and looked at them. Harriet, he said, was the reason he'd made junior partner last year. Not officially. She'd put in a word with the managing partners, leveraged her family's relationship with the firm. In exchange, Declan had agreed to manage her personal finances privately, off book. Some of it was legal, some of it was not. What does that mean, I said. What does not legal mean? He looked at me. She has assets that haven't been declared. Old family money, some of it inherited under circumstances that didn't get properly reported. She needed someone she trusted to help her restructure it quietly. I've been doing that for the past 8 months. So you've been helping a 71-year-old woman hide money from the IRS. He flinched. And the jewelry, I said. That was a gift, from her to me. I set my fork down and picked up my wine glass. Was there anything else, I asked? I kept my voice completely evened. I had practiced this, the tone of someone taking a statement rather than receiving a wound. Was there anything else between you and her? It took a long time answering. She wanted there to be, he said. She made that clear early on. I told her I wasn't interested in that. That I was married. She accepted it, but she... He stopped. He said she'd developed expectations, that she considered their relationship more significant than a professional arrangement, that she'd said things that made clear she saw him as more than a lawyer. But you didn't, I said. He looked at me. No, I swear to you, Waverley, it was never. I would never. But you kept going to her house, I said. You kept taking her gifts. You kept lying to me about where you were. He didn't have an answer for that. I got up from the table. I rinsed my plate, dried my hands, and told him I was going to stay at Priya's for a few days. He stood in the kitchen doorway and watched me pack a bag. He said my name twice. He didn't stop me. In the car, I called Priya. Then I sat in the parking garage for 10 minutes before I started the engine, because my hands were shaking and I didn't trust myself on the road. The next morning, I called a friend who had done family law before moving to a private firm. I wasn't ready to file anything. I just wanted to understand what I was looking at. She listened to everything I told her and then said very carefully that what I described regarding Harriet's finances sounded like it could expose Declan to serious professional and legal consequences, that if I wanted leverage in any kind of divorce proceeding, I should document everything before anything went public. She also said, and this is the part that landed hardest, that I should find out whether there were other assets I didn't know about. There were. Sandra found them within the week, a brokerage account in Declan's name, with a balance I'd never known existed, opened 14 months ago, initial deposit $250,000. I recognized the amount because it was slightly more than what we had agreed to save together for the down payment on a house we'd been talking about buying upstate, the down payment we'd been putting away for 2.5 years. I sat in Sandra's office and looked at the account statement and didn't say anything for a while. "He'd been taking our savings," I finally said. Sandra nodded. "Over time. Small transfers from the joint account, some routed through shell structures I'm still tracing." She paused. "Mrs. Calloway, I think there's more here than a personal relationship. I think you may have married someone who has been planning an exit for longer than you know." I thought about the watch, the gym bag, the evenings he'd been too attentive. I drove back to Priya's and sat on her couch and told her everything. She didn't say much. She just made tea and sat next to me and let me talk until I ran out of things to say. Then she said, "What do you want to do?" I didn't want to cry. I didn't want to beg for an explanation or wait by the phone for him to come to his senses. What I wanted, the thing I felt clearly underneath all the shock and the hurt, was to understand the full picture before I made a single move. Whatever came next, I wasn't going in blind. I went back to the bakery the following morning. My assistant, a 24-year-old named Beau, who had been with me for 2 years, took one look at my face and didn't ask any questions. We did the morning prep in comfortable silence, and I was grateful for it. The familiar work of it, measuring flour, starting the sourdough, the smell of the ovens, helped me think more clearly than I had in days. A week after I'd moved to Priya's, Declan called and asked to meet. Not at the apartment, somewhere neutral. He suggested the Italian place on Newbury Street where I'd first seen him through the window, which told me he either didn't know that's where I'd been, or he was trying to make a point. Either way, I said no. I suggested a coffee shop in the financial district, a block from his office, where I'd have more control of my own exit. He was there when I arrived, already seated, coffee in front of him. He looked like he hadn't been sleeping. Good. He said he'd made a mistake. He said that what he'd been doing for Harriet was something he'd rationalized at every step and could no longer defend. He said he wanted to fix things with me, that he would step back from Harriet entirely, that he would come clean to the firm if that was what I needed. "Come clean to the firm," I said. He nodded. What would that mean? He was quiet, probably termination, possible referral to the state bar. He'd need to talk to a lawyer. "And Harriet," I said. "What happens to her?" "That's not my problem anymore," he said. I looked at him. 8 months of hiding things from me and from me, firm, and now the 60-year-old woman whose professional life you've been embedded in for the better part of a year is just not your problem anymore. "She's 71, I said. "And you made her your problem the minute you decided she was useful to you?" His jaw tightened. "I want to understand something," I said. "The money in the brokerage account, the savings you transferred, was that a safety net, in case things went wrong, in case I found out?" He looked out the window. "Was I part of a contingency plan, Declan?" He didn't answer, which was its own answer. I told him I wanted an independent forensic accountant to review all our shared finances. I told him I wasn't ready to file for divorce, but I wasn't ready to come home either. I told him he needed to stop all private contact with Harriet Wren immediately, and that I would know if he didn't. I told him he had one chance to be completely honest with me about everything, not the edited version, not the version that made him look less bad, everything. He nodded. I got up. I left my coffee half finished. I walked out into the November air and stood on the sidewalk for a moment before heading to my car. The street was full of people in coats, going about their normal Tuesdays. None of them knew that the version of my life I had been living 12 days ago no longer existed, and the version that came next hadn't taken shape yet. That in-between space was the worst part, worse than the anger, worse than the betrayal. Just standing in the rubble and not knowing yet what you're going to build. Priya texted me while I was driving. "How'd it go?" she asked. I drove for 2 blocks before I answered. I typed, "Still standing." She sent back, "That's enough for today." The forensic accountant Sandra recommended was a woman named Carol who had 20 years of experience untangling marital finances and had a way of delivering devastating information with the affect of someone reading a grocery list. She found what Sandra had suspected. The brokerage account wasn't the only one. There was a second account, smaller, opened 18 months ago, funded through an LLC. Declan had registered in Delaware. Carol walked me through the structure on a whiteboard in her conference room, and I followed it without speaking until she reached the end. "So, what we're looking at," I said. She tapped the whiteboard. "In total, somewhere between $350,000 and $400,000 that moved out of your shared financial life over the last 2 years. Some of it is cleanly traceable. Some of it will take more work." I looked at the whiteboard for a long time. "Did he know I'd never find this?" I asked. She considered. "He structured it carefully enough that it wouldn't have shown up in a standard audit. If you hadn't been looking for it, you wouldn't have found it." I thought about the night he'd said "miss you" already from a hotel room in a city he wasn't in. I thought about every dinner, every careful evening, every text message from a location that wasn't real. I thought about how much energy it takes to maintain a double life and how little of that energy he'd ever directed at just telling me the truth. I called my lawyer that afternoon and told her to start the paperwork. 3 weeks later, Declan and I sat across from each other in her conference room with our respective attorneys. He looked worse than the last time I'd seen him. He had agreed, through his attorney, to a full financial disclosure and to return what had been transferred. In exchange, I agreed not to file a separate civil claim. The firm had already been notified. He had resigned. The bar referral was pending. His attorney was speaking and I wasn't listening. I was looking at the ring on my left hand. I'd kept wearing it without thinking about it, the way you keep wearing something until the habit breaks. I looked at it for a moment, and then I looked back at Declan, and he was looking at it too. There is a particular kind of grief for the person you thought you knew, not for the marriage, or the shared finances, or the upstate house that was never going to happen, for the person. The one who waited in evidence class with 2 cups of bad coffee. The one who drove 4 hours in a snowstorm to be with you when your dog died before Fig. The one you thought you were choosing when you stood at the front of a room full of people and said, "I do" out loud. That person was gone. Possibly had never been exactly who I thought. And sitting in that conference room, watching him not quite look at me, I let myself feel that for 1 quiet minute, before I put it somewhere I could return to later. We signed what needed to be signed. I stood up, shook the other attorney's hand, picked up my bag, and left. Outside it was cold and clear, the kind of Boston December afternoon that's almost beautiful if you can stand it. I texted Priya Dawn. She called me immediately. I stood on the sidewalk in front of my lawyer's building and talked to her for 10 minutes about nothing in particular, just her voice in my ear while the city moved around me. Then I went back to the bakery. Bo had the afternoon bread out of the ovens already. The place smelled like rosemary and warm flour. I hung up my coat, washed my hands, and started on the prep for the next morning. We worked side by side in the quiet of the kitchen, and I found, somewhere in the middle of shaping dough, that I was okay. Not fine, not healed, not past it, but functional, present, still standing, like I'd told Priya. The following spring, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize, a woman's voice, older, careful. She said, "Waverly, this is Harriet Wren." I sat down. I want you to know, she said, that I understand if you have no interest in speaking with me, but I've been trying to find the right way to reach out for months, and I couldn't find one, so I just called. I didn't say anything. I waited. She said, I knew Declan was married. I knew what I was doing to you, and I let myself believe it didn't matter because I wanted something, and I've always been accustomed to getting what I want. She paused. That's not an excuse, it's just true. Why are you calling me? I said. Because you deserve to hear from me directly that I was wrong. Not about the financial arrangements, which I'll be handling through my own attorney. About you. About what I did to you. I took something from you that wasn't mine to take, and I did it with my eyes open. I thought about her coat, her white hair, his hand on her back. I appreciate you calling, I said. I meant it, even though it didn't change anything, because it took something to pick up the phone, and most people wouldn't have. She was quiet for a moment, then she said, for whatever it's worth, he wasn't worth it, not for either of us. I didn't laugh, but I almost did. She hung up. I sat in the back office of the bakery with the phone in my hand for a minute. Then I put it in my pocket and went back out front. The months after the divorce were quieter than I expected. Hard in specific ways, strange in others. I learned to sleep in the middle of the bed. I adopted a second dog, a small, terrible one named Port, who made Fig's life chaotic in ways that also made me laugh more than I had in a year. I started running again in the mornings, the same loop through the public garden I used to do before the bakery took over my schedule. I called my mother more. I got better at asking for help. Priya asked me once, at dinner in the spring, whether I was angry. I thought about it. I was for a while, I said, but the anger sort of ran out of fuel once I stopped feeding it. What's left is more like clarity. About what? About what I actually want, who I actually trust, what I'm not willing to accept because it looks fine from the outside. She nodded. And the bakery? I looked around the restaurant we were in, this small place in Jamaica Plain she'd been going to for years. I thought about the morning prep, the customers who came in enough that I knew their orders, the way Beau had started bringing in ideas for new recipes and I'd been saying yes to more of them. The bakery is great, I said. And I meant it the way you mean something when you've tested it against a hard thing and found it still standing. I'm not writing this because I figured everything out or because the story has a clean ending. I'm writing it because a year ago I was standing at a counter on Newbury Street, watching my husband hold the door for a woman I didn't know, and I had a choice about what to do next, not a dramatic choice, just the ordinary daily kind. Keep looking away or start paying attention. I paid attention, and it cost me something I thought I couldn't lose and couldn't live without. Turns out I was wrong about that second part. There's a version of this story where I walk past that window on Newbury Street, and I don't let myself look too hard, where I go back to the bakery, finish the afternoon prep, and go home to a husband who would have kept lying to me for another year, maybe 2, maybe longer. I almost lived that version. I almost chose it, not out of cowardice exactly, but out of the particular exhaustion that comes from not wanting something to be true. What stopped me wasn't rage. It was something quieter. A refusal to keep pretending I hadn't seen what I saw. I think about Declan now, and I don't feel hate. What I feel is something closer to disappointment in the logic of it. Because there was a logic. Every step he took made a certain kind of sense if you were only thinking about what you wanted in the next 6 months and not about what you were building or destroying over years. He wanted the partnership. He wanted the security. He wanted a version of his future that required using people as instruments, me included. And for a while it worked, because I was trusting him. Because I thought trust was something you earned once and kept. I learned that trust isn't passive. It isn't just the absence of suspicion. It's an active thing that requires you to stay honest with yourself about what you're actually seeing. That's the part that took me the longest to understand. Not that Declan had lied, but that I had been declining, gently, repeatedly, to pay attention. The choices that hurt us most are rarely the ones we make in a single dramatic moment. They're the ones we make slowly, in small increments, by looking away. What pulled me through wasn't any one thing. It was a combination of clear-eyed stubbornness and the willingness to let people help me think. Priya sitting with me on her couch, Carol drawing structures on a whiteboard, Sandra calling with information I hadn't wanted to need. There's a kind of intelligence that isn't about being the smartest person in the room. It's about knowing when you're too close to something to see it clearly and being willing to ask for another set of eyes. I had to learn that. It didn't come naturally. And then there was just the doing of it, getting up and going to the bakery when I didn't feel like it, answering emails, shaping dough at 5 in the morning when my personal life was in pieces. That part sounds mundane, and it was. But I've come to think that showing up anyway, not heroically but just steadily, is its own form of integrity. You find out what you're actually made of, not in the moments when everything is fine, but in the ones when it isn't, and you still choose to do the next right thing. Harriet called me, and I think about that sometimes. The courage it took, and also the limitation of it, that an apology, however honest, doesn't undo anything. It just changes the shape of what you carry. I accepted it because refusing wouldn't have helped me, and because I think she meant it, and because I've found that letting people be accountable when they try to be is better for me than not. What I know now that I didn't know when I was standing at that counter watching them through the glass. The life you're afraid to lose is not always the one worth keeping. Sometimes the thing that feels like an ending is actually the first honest thing that's happened to you in years. I'm still working on it. That's the truest thing I can say.